How's it going, everyone? It's Avi from WeatherSponge1000, and in this video we're going to focus on this tropical wave that's currently roaming in the main developed region and determine if this will develop into Tropical Storm Bonnie and potentially impact the Caribbean in the near future, as well as maybe the United States in the long-term future. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. So let's begin by taking a look at the 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook provided from the National Hurricane Center. And now we have this latest update where now the National Hurricane Center is giving this a chance of developing. Right now it is a low chance at 20%, but don't at all be surprised that the chance does rise within the next couple of days, because of course as this tropical cyclone continues to move westward, it is expected that the conditions will be a little bit more favorable for tropical cyclone development. So despite the fact that there's only a 20% chance of formation right now, I don't expect that to last, because I do think that the conditions should be more favorable in the more long-term future for this tropical cyclone to develop. So don't underestimate this just because it only has a low chance of developing, because this chance could easily rise over the next several days once the National Hurricane Center really gets confidence that there will be more favorable conditions ahead of it beyond the 5-day point, which is, I think, more likely. So I wouldn't be surprised that as early as maybe tomorrow or the day after, we could see the chance of tropical cyclone formation rise to a 40% chance, or moderate chance at the very least. So that's something to keep in mind around the Caribbean. So if I were to show you guys the water vapor imagery right now, there's this tropical wave that we're keeping a close eye on. You see that there's quite a bit of convection going on. However, there isn't really a well-defined area of convection, or there isn't really a well-defined center circulation at this point. Of course, we do see a lot of thunderstorms pretty much spread out over a large area, and tropical cyclones need to be a little bit more smaller than that, with a less broad area of thunder showers, because of course there only needs to be one center of circulation and one area where all that energy could converge. With this many thunderstorms around, pretty much surrounding this trough, then it's less likely that all that energy will converge in one area for the wind speed to be high enough for this to be considered a tropical depression or storm. So we need to see that this broad low pressure system begin to get smaller and more well defined before we could really consider this having a possibility of developing into a tropical depression or tropical storm, because the thunderstorms right now are too spread out. But it is expected that the center circulation will become more well defined as it heads further westward once it really enters more favorable conditions. So that's something to keep in mind. Even if this doesn't necessarily develop into a tropical storm, what it is expected that this low pressure system will become a little bit stronger and more well defined as it heads further westward. Now, taking a look at the sea surface temperatures, the tropical wave is located right around this area, so it is over the sea surface temperatures where at the bare minimum is needed for tropical cyclone development. So sea surface temperatures ahead of it won't necessarily be a problem, especially as it heads closer to the Caribbean, where we see sea surface temperatures rise to around the 27 to 28 degree Celsius range, which is right around the mid 80s, and that's more than warm enough for a tropical cyclone to develop over water temperatures like that. Now let's take a look at what the Gfs model is stating, and it isn't necessarily good news compared to yesterday, because if we were to move forward with the Gfs model, we do see that the storm not only strengthens into a tropical storm, but potentially a hurricane just south of the Caribbean islands, and could make landfall somewhere in between these Central American countries, at least based on what the Gfs model is stating at this point. However, again, it's still far from certain, because look at the forecast hour I'm at with this run at 186 hours. So there's still a lot of time for this forecast to change, and there have been spaghetti models that have been taking this a little bit further northward to where maybe this affects Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic. So it's still far from certain regarding the track forecast. Really all depends on how these two ridges build. Of course, the Bermuda Azores High and this ridge located around the eastern half of the United States. It really all depends where that weakness in ridging or lack thereof of a weakness in ridging there is to really determine the exact track of this low pressure system, which is still uncertain. But at this point in time, both the GFS model and the European model are leaning more towards a southern track, where if we were to take a look at the European model, so as I'm speaking right now, the 12Z run is coming out. That's going to be very interesting, and I'll update you guys as more of the forecast hours get loaded up. But if I were to show you guys what the European model is forecasting based on the 0Z run, you see that the European model is forecasting this to stay further southward, just like the GFS model, but you see that it's definitely a lot weaker, and I think it's due to the fact that the European model is expecting wind shear that's a little bit stronger than the GFS model, and just a little bit more wind shear, especially for these weak low pressure systems, could make a big difference on whether or not we see tropical storm Bonnie or not. Let's compare the wind shear right around the 200 millibar portion of the atmosphere, and you see that this low pressure at the 162 hour mark, based on what the European model is stating, is located just south of Puerto Rico, and you see that there's an upper level high located just to the north of it, and you see that the wind shear is mainly light to moderate. But compare that to the GFS model, you see that the GFS model is forecasting a lot less wind shear. While there is a decent amount of wind shear towards the northern portion of South America, it isn't necessarily affecting the core of what would become Tropical Storm Bonnie at this point. So that's the reason why the GFS model is more lenient on developing this tropical storm than the European model. We're going to need to wait and see how much wind shear will be over this storm by the time this reaches Caribbean islands, because that will be key in determining if Tropical Storm Bonnie develops or not. Really all depends on the position of this upper level high. That will be huge in determining how strong the upper level winds will be. So that's something to keep in mind. But outside of the wind shear, you see that the GFS model also isn't expecting much dry air at all to really impact this storm as it heads further westward, because you see that along the surface we do have a strong southwesterly flow that's going to force a lot of that dry air further northward and keep it away from this tropical wave, which will be key in developing Tropical Storm Bonnie, at least based on what the GFS model is stating. We do see a little bit of dry air just so west of it, but it seems like the circulation is just a little bit too small to really absorb that. And the thing is, with smaller storms, they absorb a lot less air around them, and or I should say they absorb air that's a shorter distance away from them. So even though there's dry air just the outside of this low pressure system, the storm circulation is so small that the winds aren't really absorbing that dry air towards the center circulation. So the GFS model, despite this, still is expecting the moist air surrounding the center circulation to win out and pretty much fend off a lot of this dry air for this to have an open chance of developing potentially into Hurricane Bonnie, which is definitely something to keep in mind. Compare that to the European model. The European model also is expecting a little, not as much dry air to move further southward, but it is expecting a little bit more. To take a look at the 0Z run, you see that there's a little bit more dry air just to the north of this storm, which is inhibiting it really from attaining a full area of convection to where the air pressure will be low enough for a tropical cyclone to develop out of this tropical wave. And while the European model is still forecasting the moist air to pretty much fend off a lot of this dry air, there's still a strong enough amount of wind shear to where it's inhibiting this tropical wave from developing. So as a result, the European model isn't as lenient as developing Tropical Storm Bonnie. So that's something to keep in mind as well. We're going to need to see how much dry air there will be. I don't think it's going to be necessarily a major I don't think it's going to really impact this storm in a major way as this heads further westward, but it's at least something to keep in mind, because it certainly could be one of those factors that the computer models do not detect that could inhibit this storm from developing. But another thing we're gonna need to take a look at is also the steering currents, because I'm sure a lot of you guys watching from the US definitely don't want the tropical storm to come close to the southeast. So if I were to show you guys a 500 millibar height anomaly to really show you guys the main steering currents, of course, the main steering current as it moves west towards the main developed region will be this Bermuda Ridge. But as if I were to continue to move forward, we do see a little bit of a dip in the jet stream by next week, right around Wednesday, June 29th. And I think if there is a possibility that Tropical Storm Bonnie moves northward, it would be as a result of this jet stream dip. We need to pay close attention to see how far south this jet stream will dip to really determine if this does have a chance to move northward and potentially impact Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic and Haiti as well. We're going to need to pay very close attention to how far south that jet stream dips. So definitely something to keep in mind. But at this point, it seems like both of the main computer models want to take this for a southward, but I wouldn't rule out that this moves northward either, especially since at the forecast hour I'm going at, there's still a high amount of uncertainty and a lot could change between now and 6 days from now. So I'll keep you guys updated regarding that. Now, in terms of what the GFS ensemble members are stating, you see that while I'd say a majority of them are still taking a track for a southward, you see that quite a decent amount of them want to take this northward. And what's concerning is that the more northward tracks are a little bit stronger than the southern tracks, which is very interesting, as it seems like if this were to take the northern track, this would enter an area where the wind shear will be a little bit lighter, so it would be a little bit stronger, potentially impacting Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic. But the point is that I want to show you guys that there's still that possibility this could move northward despite what the current computer models are stating. So at least be aware of that possibility right around the northern Caribbean islands and maybe potentially the southeast, because maybe into next week this could maybe come close to you guys if this takes a northern track. I'll keep you guys updated regarding that and taking a look at another computer model. This one is more lenient on a southern track, but we do see at least a couple of them take it a little bit further northward, so it's at least something to keep in mind. But here's my forecast regarding the potential tropical storm Bonnie, which would probably develop somewhere right around the front-facing Caribbean islands of Barbados, some of those islands, Guadalupe. You need to pay close attention to this. Even if this doesn't develop into a tropical storm, there's still heavy rain should still be expected. And also the northern portion, the northern islands of the Caribbean, maybe Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, need to at least be aware of this. But at this point, it seems like the more likely scenario is the southern track, but there's still that possibility this could move northward. But I'll keep you guys updated regarding the chance that Tropical Storm Bonnie does develop over the next several days. We're going to need to pay close attention to the amount of wind shear, of course, and the amount of dry air. Still somewhat uncertain, but it is more certain than it was in prior days, which is definitely something we want to see. We want to see more certainty with the forecast, but still pretty uncertain at this point when it comes to land impacts. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content, and I hope you guys all have a great day.